have a fainting, sweating theme going on tonight.
Pain and sweat.
Yeah, pain and sweat. Okay, I am delighted to introduce our next storyteller to you. He has traveled all the way from San Francisco for this event. I want to give a little background, you know. The reboot survived on Zoom. We had, I think, 4 shows, and we did a very special show called The Reboot Presents COVID Stories, the Scream Inside Your Heart edition. And it was a very powerful show. And there is no silver lining to this pandemic, but there are good things that come out of it. And one of those things is that storytellers all over the nation found each other on Zoom. And we started telling stories and creating shows together, and this is still going on. And so I found this next storyteller in this process of exploring the storytelling world on Zoom, and it is a beautiful, rich world. There are so many amazing storytellers out there. So J.P. Frary came, told a story for our COVID show, and I also was looking at some of his other stories, and I saw him tell this story at a Moth Grand Slam, and it dovetails perfectly with this theme, and I invited him to come here tonight. I'll give you a little background on JP. He's only been telling stories for a few years, but he's already won 3 Moth Story Slams. He is a maker of things and works in construction. He makes beautiful furniture and pieces of art out of wood. You could check out his website. He grew up in Mendocino County, where his ability to come up with a story got him into trouble as often as it got him out of trouble. JP's story tonight is called Precipitation. Please welcome JP Frary from San Francisco, or the Bay Area.
I did it on purpose. Before I start, I just want to say when she was playing songs, she played a Tom Waits song, Come On Up to the House. Charlie Watts died, and he played drums on the original track for that, as well as Keith Richards played guitar in that. They're uncredited on the album, but I'm from Northern California, and Tom Waits lives there, and the 3 of them were at a coffee place. And I was sitting there reading a paper and looked up and was like, what the fuck? And they got 3 cups of coffee to go and left. And I went up to the clerk and I said, did you know who those guys are? And she's, 16 years old. And she goes, I don't know. Everybody stares at him and they always get cups to go. Thank you for playing that song. It was raining. It had been raining for days, and it was going to rain more. We took the canoe to the Santa Rosa Creek, just inside the city limits. My 11-year-old boy and I. His mom and I had split up, and we didn't want to burden him with all our crap, so we were really careful. And we were so careful that it seemed like we were protecting him from everything. We never argued in front of him. I never said a bad word about her, and she never said a bad word about me in front of him. And it seemed like he was getting so protected that he wasn't going to know how to navigate life. So I wanted to show him some danger, some wildness. And so we put the canoe in, and the creek was flooding. And within 4 blocks of town, it flooded out of the creek and into the fields. And it was the coolest thing you have ever seen. These places where there never used to be water, there was water, and we could paddle. And the water was about a foot and a half deep. And we paddled by hay bales stacked up. And there were tractors, axle deep in the water, and wheelbarrows and farm equipment and occasional car here and there. And we paddled around them. And in the distance, we could see some cows. And we paddled towards the cows, and the water got a little bit deeper and had a little current, but we paddled right in between dairy cows. And they were absolutely unconcerned with being knee-deep in water. They didn't care about us. They just stood there doing what cows do. And as we rounded out of the cows, we could see this half-submerged barn in the distance, and so we paddled towards that. The water got a little deeper, and I heard a scraping on the bottom of the canoe, and it was a barbed wire fence. So that's how deep the water was now, and it had a current to it, but it was still flat. And it was still beautiful and cool. And we get to this farmhouse, and there's a goat standing on top of a submerged pickup truck. And this goat is not looking unconcerned. The goat looks terrified. And my 11-year-old son says, "Let's rescue the goat." And the image in my mind of what that would turn into, and I say to my son, "There is a farmer coming, the farmer will rescue the goat." Now, I knew that wasn't true. And when we leave the goat, the water now, it has a vibe to it. It is moving. We don't have to paddle to move. We're just paddling to point where we're going. And I knew River Road was up in the distance, and I had planned to get out at River Road and hike back to the car. And I kept waiting to see River Road, and there was no River Road. There was water with no edge to it. There were trees and rocks, and the water was picking up speed. And now we weren't choosing where to go. We were just going with the water. And there were, instead of flat, it was starting to do this. And then there would be a thing under the water was going over, and we just steered away from those things. I don't know if it was a car or a tractor or a cow. I don't know what it was. I didn't plan on going into the Russian River at full flood stage, but we were swept straight into the river. I want to tell you it was white water, but it was not white. It was mud brown. And there were volleyballs and basketballs and soccer balls, and there were styrofoam coolers and lawn chairs, and anything that was in a backyard was rolling around in it. And then there were car parts and tree trunks. And we couldn't go near the edge because every time one of those things hit the side, it would roll up. And I knew we would get flipped, so we had to get right to the middle of this rolling brown roller coaster of trash. And I yelled to my son, "Paddle, paddle!" And he was paddling like mad. And he turned to look back at me, and there were tears streaming down his face. He was scared out of his mind, and so was I. What had I done? What have I done? And there were people on the sides here and there standing on top of houses, and they just waved to us. And I waved back because I couldn't help them and they couldn't help me. If you've paddled that river, which a lot of people do in the summer, it takes about 3 hours to get from where we put in to Rio Neto, and we got there in 15 minutes. It was a roller coaster of trash. It started to smell like raw sewage, which you realize all those houses that are under the water, the sewage is coming out. But at Rio Neto, the river widened out a little bit, and it got calmer, and I realized I could point to the side and get us out. And just as I started to turn the canoe, my son lunged out of the canoe and grabbed what I thought was a rug, and he pulled it to the canoe. It was a drowned German Shepherd. And he pulled the dog's head into the canoe and took the dog's collar off and put it inside his wetsuit, and then he pushed the dead dog back into the water. And I just stared at him. I had no idea what he was doing. And the flat water was gone. It was now flying again. And I went, oh my God, we're going to have to get out in Guerneville. And Guerneville, it always floods behind the houses. So I knew there was flat water there. 10 more minutes of terror, and I saw this house, and I paddled and aimed, and we got right behind the house, and the water was flat. And I said, "What did you do with that dog? What did you do with the dog?" And he turned to me and he said, "The people need to know what happened to their dog. They need to know." And before I could say anything to him, I saw the power lines in the water. And I didn't know if they were live. I don't know. I mean, it could have just been attached to a house. I don't know. So I had to turn the canoe right back into the rolling river. And I could tell my son was like, what are you doing? You know, we were out and now we're back in. At that point, I knew we were going all the way to Jenner, where the river meets the ocean. There was no other place to get out. 10 more minutes of terror, and you round this bend, and I can see Jenner in the distance. This is where the river is trying to get out, and the waves are trying to get in, and it is a rolling, it's crazy. It looks like a sideways tornado. There's no way you could get through it, but the river gets so wide there that it calms down. And all the trash that is being washed down is now just bobbing up and down. There was a chicken coop with dead chickens in it floating by. I thought, we're safe though. I can navigate. I can get us to the side. And just as I start to paddle that direction, my son sits up and points. There's a dog about halfway between us and where the river meets the ocean, and it is paddling towards us, but it is losing. The current is taking it, and my son goes, we gotta get him! We gotta get him! And we paddled like mad, and we are closing the gap, and now this dog, which is an old black lab, it sees us, and it is trying to paddle towards us, and we are closing the gap, and we are closing the gap, but we are getting closer and closer and closer to where the waves are hitting, and I realize we're going to get to that dog just as we get to the waves. And at the last minute, I turn the canoe into the shore, and we watch that dog hit the waves and disappear, and we are destroyed. We didn't say a word. We drug the canoe up the beach to the parking lot at Goat Rock Park, where there is a payphone. And I went to the payphone and I called my buddy in Santa Rosa and I said, hey, can you come get us in Jenner? And he said, Jenner, that's 30 miles away. I hung up the phone and my son came and he picked up the phone and he was crying when he called the number on the dock collar. And I could hear the woman on the phone crying back to him. He hung up the phone and we just sat on the side of the canoe in the rain and waited for a ride home. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. Thank you very much.